Hear me through the phone? No. Can you hear me through the phone?
Yay.
Yay. Great. I'm going to be very official right now, wiping my face. I just rushed home. A little behind
It's so
schedule.
hot.
It's so hot. Okay. Welcome to All Things Wellness, the complete wellness community forum where you are welcome to come on, listen. If you're a patient, not a patient, want to be a patient, and you can ask any questions that you might have about our topic. We probably would let questions about any topic, but we try to keep it on topic. I have the wellness guru, Diana Orchan, who's going to be our wealth of information tonight. These community forums happen one time a week where we discuss all things wellness. Tuesday nights at 7:45 in New York City. So tonight, I thought we would talk about a very controversial topic: sugar.
I didn't think that one was controversial.
Not controversial, but it's a topic of a lot of, good point. It's a topic
No, it's
of
a lot of buzz.
conversation in terms of, is it good? Is it bad? How much? I can eat fruit, right? And blah, blah, blah.
100%.
So let's dive in and talk about sugar. What is sugar in terms of the body? We know, white sugar is the stuff we like to put in our coffee, or we see it a lot in pastries.
So
What
there's
is sugar? What does it mean to the body?
So there's
In a good way, what does it mean to the body?
Right. So we think of sugar, we think of glucose, but there's four main types of sugar: glucose, fructose, sucrose, and lactose. Glucose comes from like fruit and honey. Fructose is known as like fruit sugar. It comes from fruit. Sucrose is table sugar. It's a combination of fructose and glucose. And then lactose is milk sugar. Those are kind of the four main types. Now they've been fabricated into tons of different types in terms of like what to see on a label. And sugar is not a problem, but it's a problem when it is consumed in excess.
When it is taken in excess.
Especially at one time.
So that bodes an important question. What is excess? Or how, what's the range of allowable? And you said at one time. So what does that mean? Define that for us.
Yeah. So you're not supposed to have more than 25 grams of added sugar per day, which people are like, what's that? It's 6 teaspoons, right? So probably about six teaspoons,
6 teaspoons of
added
white sugar.
Or any added sugar. It could be honey. It could be date syrup.
So does that mean anything less than 25 is okay?
Technically, but this is a broad generalization. You want to look at the individual, what they're dealing with. But ideally, you're sticking with no more than 25 grams, especially if you're starting to count. Some people do better with very little. It's almost impossible to have 0 every single day of your life. Some people strive for that. Some people feel better that way. But I would start, if you've never done this before, by looking at 25 grams and sticking under that amount.
So give us a little context. How many grams of sugar are in a can of Coke?
I think it's like 30 something grams.
So that blows the 25 right out of the water.
Yes, and it's all happening at once, right? And so sugar has so many say there's so many reasons why we kind of demonize sugar, and a lot of them are very valid. And I can go through those. But when you're having it all at once, it starts to cause a blood sugar spike and then drop, which impacts our mood, our energy, our brain function, our hormones. So that's why you don't want to have it all at once.
Okay. How many grams of sugar are in a banana? 18.
Wow, there you go. And there's 39 in a can of Coke. I just looked it up. More than 30.
So 18 grams of sugar in a banana. That means don't have one banana at a time. Have a half.
No, I mean, really, the way I look at like things that are higher in sugar, and some fruits fall in this category. I honestly think most fruits should be combined to slow down the blood sugar response of the body, combined with a protein or fat source. So have a banana, but maybe have it with on a side of your eggs or with some nut butter, like on the side of a meal. You ideally want to have it after a meal or with a meal or with something that's going to slow down the blood sugar response, not on its own.
There was a book in the 80s before you were born called Fit for Life, written by Harvey Diamond and his wife, Brenda? Can't remember. Harvey Diamond, though. And it was all the rage in the 80s. And the basic concept, or one of the basic concepts, was about food combining and not combining fruit with protein because the fruit wants to be digested quickly because it's water-based and the blah, blah, blah.
I have rarely seen that be effective.
I'm guessing from the eye roll, you don't agree.
I don't. I think if you have severe digestive issues, eating fruit after a meal may cause the fruit to somewhat ferment. You may experience more digestive distress, but it's unusual. Also, you don't have to sit down and eat.
That's fine.
Most people, it's fine. But if you do find that, then don't sit down and eat like an entirely large meal and then have a banana after. Maybe have it with it, or sit down and have a banana as a snack, or any fruit with like nut butter or something to slow down the blood sugar response. Yeah.
Okay. So of the 4 sugars, fructose, lactose, cellulose, I'm sorry, not cellulose, fructose, lactose, sucrose, and what did I forget? Glucose. You should keep it under 25 grams per day. That's just sort of a good general rule.
Of added sugar. Yeah. So if you eat a banana, that's not technically included, although you should be mindful of fruit intake on top of that.
What about carbohydrates? Don't carbohydrates break down into sugar?
Yes. So there are naturally occurring sugars in rice and breads. Although if you look at breads lately, people just add tons of sugar to them, or I should say the companies do. There's fructose in fruit. That's okay. Like if you are working on cutting out sugar, you should cut out added sugar first. That's okay. The problem again is when it's in excess and when it's not combined properly. But it depends on what your goals are. Like someone could easily eat some carbohydrates at every meal, especially if they are really active, they're an athlete, they need to gain weight. But if you're somebody who might want to lose weight or wants to get their blood sugar under control, you might want to be more mindful. So it totally depends on the person. But I wouldn't start with the naturally occurring sugars like carbohydrates, right? That occur in like rice and pastas and things like that. I would start with the added sugar.
So you said if a person you alluded to the fact that a person might want to cut out sugar. Why would a person want to cut out sugar? Don't we need sugar?
So our brain does thrive on glucose. However, we can get plenty of it through some carbohydrates that even occur in fruits and vegetables. But there's a lot of the sugar impacts multiple systems of the body. So there's a lot of reasons for this. One is it increases our triglyceride levels. So if you've been told by your doctor you have high cholesterol, high triglycerides, sugar plays a role there. It's a major source of inflammation, which increases our risk for disease. It causes prediabetes, which leads to diabetes. It increases our insulin, which is a fat storing hormone. It affects our cravings. It affects our nervous system. If you notice a lot of my patients will notice they're more anxious or depressed after having too much sugar. It can throw off your blood sugar, which, as I said, can start to impact our mood, our energy, our hormones. So there's a lot of things about sugar.
So keeping sugar down is a good idea. And if you are in those categories that you just mentioned, perhaps even lower than 25, trying to cut out all added sugar and maybe even reducing carbohydrates.
Absolutely.
Is there a number of grams of carbohydrates that you would recommend people stay under? Just sort of a general, one of the things that you said, which I think is important, is that you said it many times, depends upon the person.
Yeah.
So, obviously on a podcast, hopefully we're talking to a lot of people. So that's why you might want to ask a question if you have questions. The other issue is if you have something that's beyond the question, we take care of people in the office. Diana sees people at Complete Wellness. Maybe that's the right choice for you. So we're giving you generalizations. This is not personalized medicine. That's what we do, actually, is called personalized medicine. But that's when you're in person. So is there a general number that you would recommend that people keep their carbs under per day, generally?
So I find like thinking of things in a more sustainable way is helpful, meaning like instead of always you might be at a restaurant, you might be, out to dinner, you might be at a friend's house. You can't always be like, how many grams of sugar or how many grams of carbs are in this? So I more so look at it as like, try to stick with about a cup a day of carbohydrates in general. And I shouldn't actually say of carbohydrates. I should say of like starch sources like rice and bread and quinoa and pasta and things like that. And then on average, again, sugar should be like no more than 2 to 3 servings a day. Sorry, fruit. Fruit should be no more than like 2 to 3 servings a day. That's very generalized. But if I had to give general recommendations, that's what it would be.
Is that sugary fruit like pineapple same as healthier fruits like berries?
Well, it really comes down, ideally you're consuming berries, but in the average person, we're trying to get them off of added sugar and onto fruit. So if pineapple is the fruit that does it for you, great. It's all about just sticking with the portion of what a serving would be. So yes, 1 cup of berries is going to be better for you metabolically, more antioxidants, better health-wise, lower sugar. But if you want to have a cup of pineapple and that does it for you, that's okay too. But yes, there are certain fruits, apples, pears, berries, that are lower than more tropical fruits like pineapples and mangoes that are definitely higher in sugar.
People often say about, for example, fruit, oh no, it's okay. This is natural sugar.
Yeah, and there's a fine line there too, right? Because then you start to get into coconut sugar and honey, and they're all like these natural, fruit juice concentrates and date juice, and they're all these like natural sugars. And yes, they have more vitamins, maybe more minerals, more antimicrobial effects, like better like nutrition overall. But at the end of the day, sugar is sugar. But if we're talking fruits specifically, you can overdo it. It's just that most people are not like sitting there binging on fruit all day. They're sitting there binging on sugar. And so that's where I think a lot of people say, like, oh, you can't really overdo it. But then you look at someone's diet and they're having like granola bars and cereals and tons of condiments and yogurts and dressings and all these things that have all these hidden sugars. And that's actually the source of a lot of their problems, not like having an extra piece of fruit here and there.
Got it. So sugar is sugar, but the packaging is important.
Yes, there's hundreds and hundreds of names for sugar if you're looking at a package.
No, I'm talking about the form that the sugar is
Oh,
in.
yes. Like if it's a piece of fruit versus like a candy bar. Yes.
Exactly. Or versus a can of Coke. Not that we're picking on Coke tonight. Sometimes Coke is so good for you.
Always. Let's also not forget about like beverages, like teas, iced teas, sports drinks, Starbucks drinks, fruit juices, like all of those too are a big source of added sugar.
Right. I actually heard something that really resonated with me. It's not that we're eating our way to obesity and diabetes. We're drinking our way to obesity and diabetes. That a lot of these drinks, the ones you just named, are full of sugar.
Yes.
Total unnecessary sugar.
Yes. Like some of these like drinks you can get at Starbucks, at really any of these coffee places are like equivalent to more than a can of Coke. It's insane. And these people you're starting your day with this beverage.
So, like a super duper salted caramel macchiato has 30 or 40 grams of sugar in it, depending upon the size. How about the pumps of, some of us like couple of pumps of hazelnut in our coffee. Sugar?
Just in a syrup form.
So you got to be extra careful for the liquids.
You also want to realize, or people should realize, that sugar is very addictive. So it's hard to just like have a macchiato for breakfast and then you're like good all day, or eating no sugar all day. Like it lights up our dopamine receptors, and what does that do? It makes us want more. It's very addictive, and it's actually not your fault if you're eating a ton of sugar, because when you start your day with sugar or you have some sort of sugar, you just want more and more and more, and your taste buds become less and less sensitive, so you need more sugar just to satisfy yourself. So if fruit is not sweet to you, we got to retrain your taste buds.
Got it. You've lost your sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
What about athletes? Don't athletes need a lot of sugar because muscles function on sugar? And if you're burning a lot of calories, if you're running a marathon, exercise, then you need way more than 25?
If you are, so in that case, I'd probably increase like your carbohydrate intake before I'd go running into sugar, unless you're running a marathon and you like can't afford to be eating meals on the go. So you take glucose tablets, or you need more sugar directly. You need something that's going to go straight to the cell because you're literally burning through it so quickly. But if you're just somebody who's like pretty active, works out every day, then I would work on increasing like good complex carbohydrate intake before we were like, just have like a Gatorade. Definitely would not go down that path.
What's a good complex carb for a person to have before exercise?
It depends. So if you're like waking up and working out, I'll recommend having some fruit. If you are somebody who's maybe working out in the evening, maybe you want to have a little bit of starch for lunch, like rice or quinoa, or what else could you have? Farro, something like that, right? But at dinner, or some people don't even need it. They just want it afterwards to recover, in which case I would recommend doing that after dinner or with dinner. It totally depends. But there's a lot of great carbohydrate sources that you can go to that don't rely on straight up sugar.
I have heard that in the NBA, in the National Basketball Association, there is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich craze that the players have before games.
Wow, interesting. See, I would just say choose a really healthy bread if you're going to do that.
I'm
Healthier
sure that they're
option.
doing that because these
Yeah.
guys know that their energy level and their bodies is how they do their work.
Yeah.
They're probably not putting too much junk in their body.
Right. Right. But no, I mean, it's great to have a source of carbohydrates and fat before working out. So I see why they're doing
Good
it.
one, right?
I don't think they need the jelly, but
Just a little flavor.
yeah, exactly.
So is sugar stored in the body? What am I really asking?
Does sugar convert to fat?
No, I'm not really asking that.
Oh.
But maybe I'll get to that. I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich yesterday.
Mhm.
Can that sugar that I had yesterday fuel my workout today? Or is it what goes right into the bloodstream and then gone?
No, what you ate yesterday could certainly fuel your workout for the next day. That's how a lot of people are able to also work out in a fasted state.
Explain that.
Well, you're relying off of what you ate yesterday. You're not, it doesn't just like go out of your body.
So somebody can be on an intermittent fast, and we're not discussing intermittent fasting because that's a whole topic. One of my favorites, but that's a whole topic. If I had some carbs yesterday, and a little healthy sugar, whatever that is, that could still be where in my bloodstream.
No, it shouldn't be in your bloodstream anymore. Then we have a problem.
So where would that be?
It was stored in the liver and the muscles for the most part. Especially, it gets stored in the muscles.
So, okay, you led me to the next question. Does sugar get converted into fat in the liver? Isn't that what you asked?
No. Oh, in general, yes. Excess glucose does get converted into fat.
Only glucose?
No, excess. Well, they break down to glucose, but yeah, essentially excess sugar does get converted into fat.
How long does that process take?
I don't know.
Hours, days, weeks?
I think it takes hours. If you have excess sugar, it's getting converted into fat.
So sugar, and I think what's interesting is that people think about these things so differently, or at least I do. Let me speak about myself. Sugar, that's the stuff that I put in my coffee, turns to fat. So the granulated stuff turns to fat. That's the stuff that you see on a steak.
If your cells can't use it all, yes, the excess gets converted into fat.
That's
so if you go
seems like such a strange morphing, right?
Well, the more sugar
into
the more sugar you eat, the more insulin your body needs to get it into the cell. In which case, insulin.
Again, you broke up there for 1 second.
The more sugar you eat, the more insulin you need. And insulin is a hormone. And the more insulin you have circulating in the blood, the more likely you are to store fat. Insulin is a fat storing hormone. So that's why after eating like a really sugary meal or eating excess carbohydrates, I always recommend for those who are not that active, you're sitting at a desk all day. If you eat something that's really sugary, your blood sugar is going to spike. It's going to drop. You're going to be tired by 3, 4 o'clock. And you're better off getting up, leaving your desk and going for a walk. At the minimum, if you can't do that, then walking after dinner. Because exercise can help reduce the insulin response of the body. And instead, exercise works to get glucose or sugar into our cells.
So
you need less insulin.
So insulin is the real bad guy in this whole sugar conversation.
Yeah,
it's
if you
not
find someone
the sugar by itself necessarily, it's the insulin that the sugar triggers. Is that right?
Correct. The
And
more
that's
insulin
that
you have,
whole
the more
insulin
cravings you'll
resistance
have.
Thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the role of diabetes, or what's the role of sugar in diabetes?
So an easier way to think about it is that, so you need insulin to get sugar into our cells, out of the bloodstream and into our cells. So the more sugar you eat, the more insulin that you need. Eventually, you're calling for so much insulin because you're eating so much sugar that insulin stops responding. So you start to get insulin resistance. Your insulin is resistant. And so sugar just sticks around in the bloodstream. It's like, no, we got no one to take us into the club. We got no one to take us into the cells. And so what happens is over time is insulin just stops responding. And if you bring yourself, if you're a type 2 diabetic, right, or you're in the prediabetes range, eventually, if you continue like pushing and like asking for more and more insulin and eating so much sugar, insulin just literally stops. It's like, we're done here. And you basically, this is not the right way to say it, but I'm like, you basically put yourself in a type 1 diabetic state where you have no insulin, like there's nothing. And then you need an insulin pump because your body's just not producing it on its own. So you need insulin, but you don't want too much.
You need insulin to take the sugar out of the bloodstream.
If you eat a certain,
but you don't want,
I mean,
it makes sense just sort of logically that you don't want your body producing this insulin all the time.
And if you don't eat enough sugar, your body never needs insulin. Naturally, there are some receptors on the cells that don't need insulin to let it in. It's when it becomes there's too much sugar, there's an excess. Or if you exercise, you can reduce the need you can reduce the need for insulin as well. So there are ways around it. Like there are probably people that really barely use insulin because they're keeping their blood sugar balanced so well.
Is diabetes reversible with
Yes.
diet and exercise?
Type 2, yes.
Type 2.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Maybe we should talk about that. Or maybe we should invite those diabetics into the office to get personalized medicine.
We could have a few people say that we've reversed their diabetes.
Amazing. And then they could stop taking insulin or metformin or whatever it is they're on.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot. We're at 28 and a half minutes. Are there any questions about sugar, what it is, its effect, how much to eat, how much to stay away from, carbohydrates? We'd like to answer your questions, but you got to ask them for us to answer them. I'm thinking next week we're going to talk. I have a lot of
the week after next.
Oh, because you're on vacation. I'm off next Tuesday night. Yes, we're not going to ask you where you're going. Have a great time.
Thanks.
You don't want to do the podcast from vacation?
It might be the middle of the night, TBD.
So, okay, so next week there will be no All Things Wellness podcast. If there are no questions, we've hit our time. I think we answered our question tonight. Sugar, what is the real story? how to handle sugar, what to eat, what not to eat, how much to have. I hope this was helpful. Diana, have a great vacation next week.
Thank
And
you.
we will see everybody in 2 weeks. And I'm sure you're going to spend your entire vacation thinking about what our next topic should be.
Yeah. But if anybody has any ideas, anybody wants to hear us talk about something,
If
let
you
us know.
want to hear a topic, I have a whole lineup of topics to talk about. So it's not like we're lacking. But if you have a topic you'd like to hear, please let us know. How would they let us know?
They can message Complete Wellness NYC on Instagram.
Great. All right, y'all. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week. Have a great 2 weeks. Diana, have a great